Silence is one of the most misunderstood powers in the world. Society glorifies noise, loud opinions, constant chatter, over-sharing every detail of your life. We're conditioned to believe that if you're not talking, you're not relevant. If you're not posting, you're not present. If you're not constantly seen, you're somehow behind. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. It just exists. In fact, silence is often the strongest statement you can make. It's not weakness. It's not fear. It's restraint. And restraint is control. When you choose silence over reaction, you're not being passive. You're being powerful. In today's world, everyone wants to be first to speak, first to respond, first to be heard. But the real players, the ones who move mountains, they don't rush to fill the silence. They study the silence. They let others reveal themselves. They don't compete with noise. They use the quiet as their advantage. When you're silent, you listen. When you listen, you understand. And when you understand, you make better moves. The ones who are quick to speak usually expose themselves. But the one who observes first, they strike with precision. Silence gives you time. Time to think, time to grow. Time to act with purpose instead of panic. There's a certain kind of strength that comes with not needing to respond. When someone disrespects you and you say nothing, not because you're weak, but because you're above it, that's power. When you walk away from chaos without a word, because you know your peace is worth more than proving a point, that's real strength. People often confuse silence with surrender. But the truth is, silence is mastery. It's the refusal to engage in battles that don't serve your growth. You're not here to win arguments. You're here to win in life. And that means knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. You see, silence also teaches discipline. In a world built on reactions, discipline is rare. Everyone wants to clap back, make their opinion known, prove their position. But when you stay silent, you're telling yourself, I don't need the approval. I don't need to be understood right now. I know my truth. That's a mindset very few ever reach. It requires inner work. It requires confidence. It requires being so grounded in who you are that outside noise doesn't shake you. Silence isn't the absence of voice. It's the presence of control. It's being loud in your mind while keeping your mouth closed until it truly matters. There is also a psychological edge in silence. People don't know what you're thinking. They don't know what you're planning. You become unpredictable, mysterious, in control. While they waste energy trying to figure you out, you're busy leveling up. You're not explaining your moves. You're making them. And one by one, your silence starts to speak louder than any words ever could. You walk into rooms differently. You're not trying to impress. You're not performing. You just are. And that presence, that quiet, grounded energy, it makes people pause. It makes them listen. It makes them respect you without even knowing why. Most people chase validation. They want to be seen, heard, liked, accepted. But those who learn the art of silence, they don't chase, they attract. Because silence is magnetism. It's mystery. It's power that doesn't beg. It commands. It makes people wonder what you know, what you're thinking, what you're capable of. It gives your energy space to grow, uninterrupted. It protects your peace. And slowly, without noise, without announcements, without explanation, you become unstoppable. Not because you shouted the loudest, but because you stood the calmest. That's what silence gives you. And once you master that, no one can take it from you. Distraction is the killer of purpose. In today's world, where everyone's constantly broadcasting their every move, silence feels unnatural. But that's exactly why it's powerful. When you remove yourself from the noise, you start to see what really matters. You stop performing and start aligning. Focus is born in silence, not in chaos. You cannot build a life of meaning while you're constantly checking if people are watching. Every time you speak just to be seen, every time you respond just to feel relevant, you're trading your focus for momentary attention, and attention fades. But what you build in silence, that lasts. The truth is, silence creates a mental environment where clarity can grow. When you're quiet, you begin to hear your own voice, not the opinions of friends, family, or society. That voice has always been there, but it gets drowned out by the noise you allow into your life. Silence is not about isolation. It's about clarity. It's about cutting through the fog of comparison and realizing what you want, not what you're conditioned to want. In silence, you reconnect with your mission. You reconnect with your why. And once that happens, distractions lose their grip. You start operating from intention, not impulse. When you stop explaining yourself, you conserve energy. Think about how much time you waste telling people what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're going to do it. That's energy that could have been poured into the actual work. Every time you over-explain your path to someone who doesn't even understand your vision, you dilute your power. Silence keeps your energy pure. It keeps your mission sacred. Not everything needs to be shared. Not every move needs an audience. Silence gives you room to execute without interference, without judgment, without second guessing yourself based on someone else's limited perspective. In silence, your work speaks for you. That's the shift. When you go quiet and dive into your craft, the results start to echo louder than words ever could. You're not telling people what you're building anymore. They're seeing it. And that's where the real respect comes from. People don't admire noise. They admire transformation. And transformation requires time alone, away from opinions, away from applause, away from doubt. You want to be taken seriously, disappear, build, return with results. The quietest seasons of your life are often the most productive. Because no one is pulling at you, distracting you, or feeding your insecurities. There's also a certain confidence that comes with choosing silence. When you're truly locked into your goals, you don't need to convince anyone. You're not looking for validation. You're looking for results. You're not rushing to show progress because you're too busy making it. That level of focus, of silence, sends a message all on its own. You become the kind of person who doesn't chase opportunities. They come to you because you're too focused to be ignored. The world notices the ones who are consistent, intentional, and quietly driven. There's power in that type of presence. A presence that doesn't speak until it's undeniable. And let's be honest, most people talk more than they act. They speak about plans they never commit to. They announce goals they'll never chase. But when you stay silent, when you stop declaring and start doing, you separate yourself from that crowd. You become different. You don't need to say, "I'm working." Your progress says it for you. You don't need to prove you're serious. Your actions make it clear. Silence is not a void. It's a weapon. It sharpens your focus. It protects your momentum. And when the work is finally done, it speaks louder than any noise ever could. Real confidence is quiet. It doesn't seek approval. It doesn't broadcast itself. It doesn't need the spotlight to feel valid. When you truly know your worth, you stop chasing validation from people who don't even understand your vision. You stop explaining yourself to those who aren't even qualified to hear your truth. That's where silence becomes a power move. It tells the world, "I know who I am. I don't need to prove it to you." You don't have to defend your dreams, your choices, or your timing. When you're grounded in self-belief, you realize you don't owe anyone an explanation. When someone misunderstands you, your instinct might be to clarify, to defend yourself, to set the record straight. But the truth is, clarity doesn't come from noise. It comes from consistency. You don't fix misconceptions by arguing. You fix them by living in your truth so powerfully that the results rewrite the narrative. Silence isn't weakness. It's a decision to prioritize peace over petty battles. It's recognizing that not every comment deserves your energy. Not every challenge deserves a response. And not every misunderstanding needs correction. When you hold your silence, you're telling the world that your energy is reserved for something bigger. The more you explain yourself, the more you dilute your own conviction. You give away pieces of your truth just to be understood by people who may never truly get it. But when you're silent, you protect your purpose. You protect your vision from the weight of unnecessary opinions. Silence becomes the boundary between you and the noise. It keeps your journey intact, free from outside influence. You don't have to constantly reassure people about your direction when you trust yourself enough to stay the course, even when it's lonely. Confidence doesn't always speak. It stands firm, even when it's silent. There's a power in silence that loud voices can't touch. Loud people often speak from insecurity. They overcompensate, they exaggerate. But silent confidence, that's untouchable. It doesn't compete. It doesn't compare. It just is. And when you walk into a room with that kind of energy, people feel it. You don't have to say a word. They just know. Because presence is louder than volume. You stop being the person trying to prove something and become the person others observe, respect, and sometimes even fear. Not because you're arrogant, but because you're sure. Sure of your path, sure of your values, sure of your timing. Silence also builds emotional intelligence. When you're not rushing to speak, you learn to read people. You begin to understand intentions, patterns, energies. You become a better observer of human behavior. And that skill, it's priceless. It helps you navigate relationships, business, leadership, everything. Most people are too busy talking to see the full picture. But when you're silent, you see what they miss. You catch the details. You sense the shifts. You gain insight. And insight leads to influence. You don't need to speak loudly. when you're several steps ahead in your awareness. That's what silence trains you to do, to think deeper and move smarter. When you operate from self-mastery, you don't just control your words, you control your reactions. That's where real growth begins. You stop reacting emotionally. You stop needing to be right. You start choosing peace over ego. And that shift changes everything. It changes the way you lead, the way you love, the way you evolve. Silence isn't the absence of emotion. It's the presence of control. It's the ability to feel everything and still respond with wisdom. That's what makes you powerful. Because anyone can speak. But very few can stay silent, remain grounded, and still move with unshakable intention. Silence reveals everything that noise hides. When you're quiet, people start to show you who they really are. You begin to notice the words they choose, the motives behind their actions, and the energy they bring into the room. Silence doesn't just help you hear others, it helps you see them. And most people don't realize how much they reveal in conversation. They speak without filters. They expose their insecurities. They unknowingly show you their priorities. But you can't catch any of it if you're too busy trying to talk over them. If you want to become a better judge of character, learn to be quiet. Learn to observe, not react. Learn to watch people unfold. The best decisions you will ever make will come from the moments you stayed silent long enough to see the truth. When everyone around you is rushing to speak, the person who pauses, who listens, who processes, that's the person in control. It's easy to fall into the trap of fast opinions, instant responses, and emotional reactions. But silence builds distance between stimulus and response. That space is where clarity lives. In that space, you don't just hear what's being said. You understand why it's being said. You read the emotion under the words. You pick up on subtle cues. And that deeper awareness, it gives you the edge. Silence is where strategy is born. The loud ones reveal their hand too early. They let you know their plans, their fears, their doubts, all out in the open. But when you stay silent, you keep your power hidden. You move with mystery. People can't predict your next move. And that alone becomes an advantage. They don't know what you're thinking. They don't know how much you know. They don't know where you're going next. That makes you dangerous in the best way. Because silence gives you time to analyze every move being made around you, while keeping your own game plan protected and untouched. One of the most powerful things silence teaches you is patience. You stop rushing to fix everything. You stop trying to control every outcome. You learn to sit with the discomfort and let the truth rise on its own. Not everything needs to be solved with words. Some things require stillness, space, and time. Silence helps you practice restraint in moments where reacting would only make things worse. It helps you realize that clarity doesn't always come from pushing. It often comes from allowing. You begin to understand that just because something is urgent doesn't mean it's important. And just because someone demands a response doesn't mean they deserve one. Silence also makes your presence more intentional. When you stop filling space with noise, every word you say begins to carry more weight. People start paying attention when you speak, because they know you only speak when you mean it. You stop being part of the background chatter and start becoming a voice of authority. Even in few words. Silence gives your voice power, not because it's louder, but because it's rarer. In a world where everyone's constantly talking, those who choose their moments wisely stand out. They are remembered, respected, heard. There's a discipline that comes with observation. It's not always easy to hold your tongue, especially when you know you're right or when you're emotionally charged. But when you choose silence over reaction, you rise above the noise. You remove yourself from chaos and enter clarity. That discipline transforms your relationships, your leadership, your mindset. You don't waste energy defending yourself. You don't fall into the trap of proving points. You don't feed the drama. Instead, you focus on the bigger picture. You respond when it matters. And with that control, you build a life that's not reactive but intentional. That's the power of watching first, speaking later. In a world obsessed with speed, silence slows you down just enough to make the right moves. Everyone's rushing to speak, to respond, to be seen. But when you slow down and stay silent, you stop running with the crowd and start moving with purpose. You begin to notice what others miss. While the world is lost in noise, you're focused, centered, deliberate. You're not reacting impulsively. You're thinking strategically. Silence gives you space to breathe. It helps you detach from the chaos and reconnect with your inner compass. It becomes your anchor in a world constantly trying to pull you in every direction. People often mistake silence for inactivity, but the opposite is true. In your quietest moments, the most profound inner work is happening. That's where the mental breakthroughs occur. That's where you confront the things you've been avoiding, the fears, the doubts, the truths. When the world goes quiet, you can no longer hide from yourself. But that's the gift. Silence brings you face to face with your reality. And in that confrontation, transformation begins. It forces you to ask the hard questions. What do I really want? What am I running from? What am I afraid to admit? And when you answer honestly, everything changes. Silence teaches you the art of detachment. You stop needing validation. You stop craving constant feedback. You stop measuring your progress by how many people are clapping. In silence, you start to rely on your own standards, not society's. You begin to live for fulfillment, not applause. And once you reach that space, you can no longer be manipulated by trends, opinions, or the temporary highs of external praise. You're no longer trying to impress. You're trying to grow. You're no longer living for others. You're living in alignment. That shift in energy, quiet, focused, intentional, is what sets high achievers apart from the rest. The most powerful growth doesn't happen in front of a crowd. It happens when no one's watching. It happens in the silence, in the sacrifice, in the hours no one will ever see. The breakthroughs, the discipline, the inner healing, those moments shape you more than any applause ever will. And when you emerge from that silence, stronger and more certain, people will think you changed overnight. But you'll know the truth. You'll know it was the result of choosing silence when it was easier to complain, choosing focus when it was tempting to seek approval, choosing growth when it would have been easier to stay the same. Silence also strengthens your intuition. You stop second-guessing yourself because you finally learn how to hear yourself. In the noise, your intuition is drowned out by opinions, trends, and distractions. But in silence, it becomes louder than ever. You start trusting your gut. You start making decisions from a place of wisdom, not fear. You no longer need endless advice to move forward. You begin to walk your path with confidence, knowing that the answers you've been chasing have always been within you. That level of self-trust can only be built in silence. It's not taught, it's earned, moment by moment, when you choose to listen instead of speak. And then something beautiful happens. Your silence begins to attract exactly what you once thought you had to chase. The right people, the right opportunities, the right energy, all start showing up, not because you begged for them, but because you became aligned enough to receive them. You stop chasing attention and start embodying presence. And presence is magnetic. It's not about being the loudest person in the room. It's about being the calmest, the most grounded, the most aware. That's what silence gives you, not just peace, but power. The kind of power that doesn't shout, doesn't chase, doesn't perform. It just exists. And that's enough. Silence is a discipline, not a weakness. In a world addicted to quick responses and loud opinions, choosing silence takes strength. It requires self-control. When you resist the urge to respond to every insult, every challenge, every moment that provokes you, you gain control over yourself. And that is the ultimate power. Most people react without thinking. They're driven by ego, by emotion, by the need to be right. But when you choose silence, you rise above it. You stop letting other people's chaos dictate your energy. That's not passivity, it's maturity. It's knowing that real power isn't proven through words. It's felt through composure. Choosing silence doesn't mean you're suppressing your emotions. It means you're channeling them. It means you're aware of them, but you're not ruled by them. You feel anger, but you don't let it define your actions. You feel fear, but you don't let it make your decisions. Silence becomes the gap where awareness lives. And when you can pause in that gap, when you can sit with your emotions instead of reacting to them, you evolve. You stop being a puppet of your moods. You become the master of your reactions. That's the difference between someone who lives in survival and someone who lives in strategy. In silence, you learn how to sit with discomfort. Most people can't handle stillness because in that stillness, all the suppressed feelings come to the surface. The guilt, the regret, the doubt, the pain. It all rises, and instead of facing it, they run. They fill the silence with distraction. But if you want true growth, you have to stay. You have to sit in that discomfort and let it teach you. Silence isn't comfortable because growth isn't comfortable, but it's necessary. It's the only space where healing truly begins. Not in noise, not in denial, but in full, raw awareness of who you are and where you need to go. The more you practice silence, the less reactive you become. You stop needing to clap back. You stop needing to explain yourself. You stop being baited by every little thing. That stillness inside of you becomes a kind of shield. It protects your energy. It makes you untouchable in a world where everyone else is constantly triggered. When people try to pull you into drama, you don't flinch. When things don't go your way, you don't fall apart. That's not detachment. It's emotional strength. You've trained yourself not to react but to respond. Thoughtfully, powerfully, silently. There's a deep kind of freedom in knowing that you don't have to engage with everything. You don't have to fight every battle. You don't have to prove yourself in every room. You can observe, process, and move forward without leaving a trace of reaction behind. That is the mark of someone who has mastered their inner world. Because silence doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about your peace not to waste it. And that peace becomes your edge. While others burn themselves out trying to control everything around them, you control the one thing that matters, yourself. Eventually, you realize that silence is the most powerful answer you can give. It ends arguments. It protects your time. It commands respect. And most importantly, it keeps your energy where it belongs, with you. You begin to see silence not as something empty, but something full of intention, full of clarity, full of power. And from that place you move differently. You're no longer performing for approval. You're no longer reacting to noise. You're moving with calm precision. Every step calculated, every word chosen, every moment intentional. That's the power of silence. It doesn't just change how the world sees you. It changes how you see yourself. When you stop talking and start listening, truly listening, you begin to hear more than just words. You hear intentions. You hear fears. You hear insecurities hidden beneath confident tones. Most people listen to respond, not to understand. But silence flips that. It makes you slow down, tune in, and pay attention. You begin to see the spaces between words, the body language, the subtle shifts in energy. And suddenly, the world becomes clearer. People expose themselves not through what they say, but through how they say it, what they avoid, and what they repeat. But you'll never catch that truth if your mind is always preparing a reply. Silence helps you hear what others don't even know they're revealing. The ability to listen without interrupting is rare. It requires humility. It requires patience. It's not just about keeping your mouth shut. It's about being fully present. Most people hear half of a sentence and jump in with advice, with opinions, with assumptions. But when you stay silent and let people finish, they often say more than they intended. And in that extra space, you uncover depth. You start to understand not just their surface level words, but their inner world. You build connection, you build trust, you show respect. And in return, people start opening up to you in ways they never have before, not because you're loud, but because you're present. Listening makes you a better leader. It makes you a better friend, a better partner, a better human. Because when people feel heard, they feel valued. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to have all the answers. Sometimes, your silent attention is more healing than any advice you could give. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's knowing that your silence can hold space for someone else's truth. And that space, that's where growth happens. That's where bonds are built. It's not always what you say that makes the difference. It's how well you receive what others are trying to say. But silence isn't just about listening to others. It's also about listening to yourself. The noise of the world can drown out your own voice if you're not careful. Everyone has an opinion about who you should be, what you should do, how you should live. But when you get quiet, truly quiet, you start hearing the one voice that matters most, your own. You remember what you want, what you believe in, what sets your soul on fire. Silence brings you home to yourself. And from that place of alignment, you stop living a life of reaction and start living a life of intention. The more you practice silence, the more you realize how much noise is unnecessary. People talk just to fill space. They speak out of nervousness, out of habit, out of the fear of silence itself. But when you grow comfortable with quiet, you stop filling voids with words that don't matter. You stop over-explaining. You stop oversharing. You say only what needs to be said, and that restraint gives your words weight. You become someone who speaks with purpose, someone who doesn't just talk, but communicates. And that distinction is what separates the forgettable from the unforgettable. In silence, your awareness sharpens. You begin to sense what's not being said. You feel the energy in a room. You understand who's aligned with you and who isn't. Without needing a single word, your instincts grow stronger. Your perceptions grow clearer. And that awareness turns into power. Because the more you know, the better you can navigate every part of life. From relationships to business to your own personal growth. Silence isn't just the absence of noise. It's the presence of deep awareness. And once you learn to truly listen, to others, to the world, to yourself. You stop reacting aimlessly and start responding with purpose. That's when your life begins to align with who you were always meant to be. So let them wonder. Let them question your silence. Let them misunderstand it. Because your silence isn't emptiness, it's power, it's wisdom, it's intention. The world may chase noise, but you move differently. You grow in stillness, you lead with clarity, and you speak only when your words are backed by purpose. That's not weakness, that's mastery. Stay silent, stay grounded, and watch how everything you once chased starts to find its way to you. Not because you shouted for it, but because you became the kind of person silence builds, quietly powerful, unshakably focused, unstoppable.